Thanks, Rui. When Rui sent me a note letting me know that Warren was going to be talking about Red Brook and then talking about his book as well, I did something I've never done before, and I asked if I could actually introduce a speaker. I'm generally not looking to participate in more meetings, but this was one that I couldn't miss, and I will ask for your forgiveness, Warren, in particular. And I'm glad this will be taped or recorded because I'm on the board of the American Fly Fishing Tackle Association, and we're hiring an executive director and have an interview at 7:30. So I'm going to have to scoot off and do that, another Zoom interview. But the reason I wanted to introduce Warren is because number one, I know he's going to hate what I'm about to say, because Warren he represents the best of TU in the sense that there are so many unsung heroes in this organization who just put their head down and they show up at town meetings, they write comments. When we make the call and ask people to come back and talk to their members of Congress, they show up. Um, and I truly think that Warren is the best of what we are as an organization. When you think about the patience that he demonstrates on topics that he has worked on for decades, and yet decision makers still, towns still propose projects that could undo all of the work, $4 million worth of investments in a single stroke. The persistence, the goodwill, the grace, the effectiveness. When I heard about Red Brook, the threat to Red Brook from the Wareham vote, I thought the vote was going to go the other way. I thought it was going to go 7-1 against us because that's what happens, right? We lose more and more. Conservation is so much about managing and overseeing loss. And yet that is, I think that win, I actually wrote about it later because I think that win typifies the best of what TU is all about. And the stick-to-itiveness that Warren has demonstrated throughout his tenure as a volunteer leader at TU, it's just exemplary. And it's not just exemplary for volunteers. There are staff people who see that and take note of it too, starting with the guy who leads the organization. If wisdom had a name, I think it would be Warren Winders. And so I'll let you all read the great write-up that Rui put here about Warren. But I I can't tell you how pleased I am to introduce a friend and a mentor, Warren Winders. And so Warren, why don't you take it away from here?
Thank you, Chris. Uh, thank you for the kind words, and I don't deserve them, but thank you anyway. So anyway, what we're looking at here, this is Red Brook. This is a picture of Red Brook and what it looks like today after being restored. And I think one of the things that over a lifetime that I've been impressed by is the fact that you can't really separate the land from the water, and you can't separate the water from the fish. And you have to have reverence for all of them. And Fred, Fred was talking about striped bass earlier, and how they need to be treated with some degree of reverence. And if we're going to save our rivers and preserve our fisheries, we have to treat them as if they are safe. And so this first slide is a picture of Red Brook, and it's the type of picture that some fishermen give me a hard time about, because all these overhanging bushes and the trees in the water and stuff like that make it difficult for them to double haul and throw a long fly line. But the fact of the matter is, wild fish need a wild river. So that's what we try to do at Red Brook. That was the goal of the restoration. When you talk about restoration, what are we restoring it to? Again, here, David Pauly's shifting baseline comes to mind. We have so few pristine streams in Massachusetts that most people in the state don't know what a pristine stream looks like. And Maine does a little bit better, I think, in New Hampshire if you go up into the White Mountains. But the fact is that, you know, almost every waterway that we have in our region has been changed. So the only thing that I can think of, or that we were able to think of in terms of what to do with Red Brook, was to try to let it rewild, to try to bring it to a point where it would start, the trees would fall in on their own. In the meantime, we did some work on it, but um, that's the point I wanted to make with that slide. Recently, something amazing happened. You know, I was stunned by the Wareham vote. I think almost everybody else was, and it was a wonderful thing to be there, not holding a sign, because they wouldn't let us hold a sign, but they would let us give out handouts, and to be there with the group from the coalition of the community land and water coalition, the Wareham land trust, the onset people of so many different groups, and standing there talking to the people who were literally lined up for hours to get into that town meeting so that they could vote, was one of the most inspiring moments of my life. Inspiring that there were so many people that cared about preserving not just Red Brook, but preserving the Pine Barrens, preserving the natural resources in their town. And so when I saw how the vote came out, I wasn't, well, I guess I was shocked, but I had a good idea. As the people were going in and we talked to them, I tried to give them a handout, and they'd say to me, "We don't need a handout." Because we don't need a handout because we understand. We're with you all the way. And so it was a wonderful day. And it's a day that gave, I think, a lot of us with their hope for the future. So I just want to point out a couple things about Red Brook. If it comes out of, it's only about 4.5 miles long. It's a small stream by any standard. You know, a deer can jump across it almost everywhere along the whole stream. It comes out of White Island Pond. The part that comes out of White Island Pond is actually a ditch that was dug for alewives back around 1800. It actually begins somewhere just somewhere just south of this gas line, and a bunch of springs that come down, and then it goes underneath 25, and it runs down through a very densely settled neighborhood. Right here, this gash in the land is where Nodos wanted to put their racetrack and their development, and it's sitting right on the aquifer that runs into flows through the soil into and expresses itself in Red Brook, and that's the cold water that the brook trout need to survive. That's the cold water that's kept them alive here for 10,000 years after the ice retreat, and kept the brook trout of all the other streams that once had brook trout in them alive up until about 200 or 300 years ago, anyway. So it was imperative that this area not be turned into a cement jungle. You talk about stormwater runoff and that sort of thing. This is exactly the last thing we needed. What we have here is a fragile resource. It's not, you know, sure, we brought it back to some extent, but what we learned was that the threats are never ending. So, you know, moving forward, I know that Rui and the rest of us who are on the committee have talked about, you know, some ways to try to preserve some of this open space up here. One of them being area of critical environmental concern, a label for the land one of the others is to try to buy some of this land. So our work isn't done yet by any means. And here's a map that was put together in the early 2000s, and it shows actually the land, this green area, which is part of the total preserve of 883 acres, now extends up through here because the Makepeace land was purchased in 2010. But you'll see right here that this is the land that Nodos wanted to build on as part of this area, you know, the land of critical land. And here's the fish. Somebody once said when I first got started at Red Brook, they said it's the fish that launched 1,000 studies or something like that, you know. Unfortunately, for most of the streams that this fish once thrived in, all that work was done too late. And recently the Santuit died. And we still haven't gotten to the bottom. We have a good idea of what caused it, but you know, I don't know if we'll ever be able to solve that problem. And here's the man who made Red Brook possible, Theodore Lyman, and he was on the first Fisheries Commission. He built the first hatchery at Maple Spring, bought land and house at Red Brook, sought to restore salt of brook trout, and his descendants continue to work to restore salt of brook trout. The land I'll change it. Over a period of time, go back here. Over a period of time, the family managed to purchase 638 acres along Red Brook. But there's a caveat that goes with this. And one of the things that Theodore Lyman III did was he was one of the first promoters of the hatchery solution. And as such, he believed that if you put fish ladders in the dams and you build hatcheries, then you could leave the dams in place and you wouldn't have any issues. And he was wrong about that, as it turns out, because the dams alter forever the temperature and the oxygen and the fish ladders were inadequate to ensure fish passage in most places, or sufficient fish passage. So, you know, there's good and bad involved here when you look at this story. And you know, Lyman was head of the, not only was on the Mass Fisheries Commission, but he was also on the, for a while, he was the head of the Fish Culture Association. And he served in a kind of a hatchery or promoting fish culture on the national Fisheries Commission. This all began in '87. Henry Lyman actually wrote a letter to TU and asked if they would take over stewardship. '91, the agreement between TU and the Lyman Red Brook Trust was worked out and hammered out. '93, we did our first Red Brook Family Day fundraiser, and a lot of people are asking when we're going to do that again. People miss it. We haven't done one since 2010. So it might be a nice open air way for us to raise some money in the future again. In 2001, TU got together with the trustees. Charles Garvin, you know, spoke to the trustees, and along with Henry Lyman, and we put together an MOA that created the management team for the Lyman Reserve. Created the Lyman Reserve, which is the land south of 25, and land north of 25 was purchased for $400,000 and created a a fund for the management of the Lyman Reserve, and the Red Brook Wildlife Management Area was created on that land, some 400 plus acres. And in 2006, Brian Graber was now, well, he was with American Rivers. I don't know who Brian's with now, but he was with Riverways, which later became the Division of Ecological Restoration. Gave me a call and said, you know, we'd really like to make Red Brook a priority project. And so we, at, you know, 10 minutes to the deadline, we dropped off a pile of copies of our proposal, and of course we became a priority project for the Division of Ecological Restoration, and the first dam was taken out, which is the uppermost dam, and then over the course of the next couple of years, another dam was taken out, and then finally in 2009, the last two dams, the cement plumes in the lower part were taken out, and some other work was done too. And then in 2010, the state blew our minds by purchasing the AD Makepeace cranberry bogs, the century bogs, for $3 million. And basically protected all the riparian land along Red Brook, from the bay right up to White Island Pond, and created 883 acres of open space. So the total cost, if you consider all of the dam removals and everything, came to around $4 million, and all the grants that we pulled in over the years. Steve Andrews, myself, wrote a lot of grants. We got a lot of help from Joe. I forget Joe's. Anyway, I've got a brain cramp here, but you know, we got a lot of help from TU National. You know,
McGurn.
Huh?
Joe McGurn.
Joe McGurn, yes. How can I forget Joe's last name? I know how I forgot Joe's last name the way I forget a lot of stuff. But yeah, so Joe helped us with grants and you know, for all kinds of stuff, for data collection, basically, temp loggers, flow meters, you name it, you know. So we got great help from him, a great guy. Enjoyed years and years of working with him. And of course, all the people from all the chapters, but in particular my own Southeast Mass chapter, who put in tens of thousands of volunteer hours to you know, to restore Red Brook, to raise money, to be advocates for it, and you know, all of this for a little stream, a very little stream. Just amazing. So here are some pictures. This is the old cement plume for people who hadn't been there beforehand. We call this the big plume. You can see how this thing choked fish pasture. Actually, the Lymans used to keep boards in there to make a big pond behind it, because they thought the pond would make deeper water. Except the problem was that when you slowed down the flow, all the sand coming down from the bogs filled up the pond, and you had shallower water. Anyway, even with the boards out, the fish had to make their way up through just a few inches of water on these cement floors of the flumes. So it wasn't a good situation. And here we have a picture of it coming out. I'll go through this quickly. And this is what that area looked like afterwards. If you've been to Red Brook, you've probably seen all this wood and stuff. You know, we had somebody from Marine Fisheries who, you know, we had a little debate about wood and streams and how they impact herring runs. And luckily, Steve Hurley, who's our division, district fisheries biologist, was willing to speak up, along with Beth Lambert from DER. And we got the individual from Marine Fisheries down here and had him look at it and told him, well, the herring come up through this stuff with no problem whatsoever. In fact, the herring like to hide under the wood because there's usually about 4 or 5 ospreys working the stream when the herring are coming up. And he said, wow, we would have cleared all that wood out of there. So I guess I bring that up because, you know, and it had been mentioned earlier that the biggest issue that sometimes we're faced with is the cultural attitudes. And one of the things that people instinctively do is they want to clear out a stream. And one of the things when they think of fish passage, they think that this stuff blocks the fish. Well, this stuff doesn't block the fish. This stuff is very porous, unlike a cement dam going across it. So so it was a good conversation in the end, and a lot of that stream clearing that we were seeing in some of our cold water streams running into the Cape and running out of the Cape and into Buzzards Bay and stuff. That stuff has come to an end, and I think people appreciate the value of wood now. You know, speaking of volunteers, I think for about 3 years, we would once a month we would get together, not in the dead of winter because the eggs, salt is spawned in November, and the eggs sit in the reds. And this is a very small stream, as you can see. So we were very concerned about people stepping on the reds during the time that the eggs and the sac fry were in the reds. So we wouldn't start working. We would accumulate wood. We got all the wood right off the land, dead wood that was just lying on the ground. We'd accumulate alongside the stream during the wintertime, and then we would take our equipment. We had a variety of different devices, and we would place the wood in the stream. And we did this because the stream had been, for probably a century, the Lymans had assiduously cleared the stream in the mistaken belief that they were helping out the fish, when in fact it was just the opposite was taking place. So this is a look at all the people who contributed to the restoration or the rewilding, if you will, of Red Brook. And so, you know, protect, reconnect, restore, or rewild, if you will. You know, that's, you know, wherever we're faced with moving water, this is what we, you know, end up trying to do. And, you know, we just talked about the Neponset River and the cold water streams that flow into the Neponset River, and trying to reconnect them to the river, and reconnecting the Neponset itself to the ocean. So traditional ecological knowledge tells us that the land, the rivers, the sea, the air, and the creatures who live therein are all connected. Herring, eels, white perch, striped bass, ospreys, kingfishers, otters, people. Everything is part of this web of life, of the ecosystems that sustain us in the end. So those lessons are part of what this book is about. Actually, those lessons are what this book is about in its entirety. And about a year and a half ago, my brother Gary, he decided that he wanted to become a book designer. He's a graphic artist, and he wanted to experiment with designing a book. So he said, "Well, what have you got?" You know, and I said, "Well, I've got a bunch of stuff. I've been writing for a long time, and I've got a bunch of poems, and I've got some stuff from my blog and some stuff that I sold to different magazines and stuff, things like that I can throw together." And he said, "Well, let's do a book." He said, "What do you want to call it?" And I said, "Wild River." And so Wild River is the name is both, it's both a metaphor and it's a reality. And the stories told in this book are actually the path that brought me to Red Brook. I think that it's what made Red Brook appeal to me as a concept. These are some of my brother, as I said, is an artist. These are some of the illustrations that he put in the book. I made him put the trout in. He didn't think it was he painted this trout on the back of an envelope in a letter that he sent to me, and I had to I had to include it in the book. This illustration is for a poem called "Walking Across the Back of the Universe," and the other illustration, which you may not be able to see, is my old dory that is an illustration for Summer Islands. So one of the things that I think motivates all of us to be conservationists and to be advocates for nature and be advocates for fisheries is biophilia. And biophilia usually comes to us when we're quite young, and well, it doesn't have to, but it begins at some point in life. In my case, as a child, I remember just being stunned at the beauty of nature. When I was a little boy, and I'd go down to the local pond on opening day, and I would watch the sun come up, and I would catch a yellow perch, and I'd just be amazed by the beauty of that fish. For me, for years, a yellow perch was the most beautiful fish I'd ever seen, and my idea of the ultimate game fish. And then I found trout. Actually, I found trout when I was a little bit younger, because my grandfather used to take me brook trout fishing in Prince Edward Island, but that's a different story. This is the summit of Mauna Loa, and this is my first wife, Robin, and we're at 13,700 feet on the Big Island of Hawaii. And I had my first epiphanies as a child, but this was another epiphany entirely, a different one, and it's one that I think put my minuscule little human life in perspective. There's nothing like standing on the edge of a crater, and although you can't really get the sense of how deep this thing is or how big it is, you could fit the whole darn city of Boston into this crater easily. And none of the skyscrapers would come close to the top of the rim. And inside there were all these fumaroles and smoke belching out and that sort of thing. And to get there, it's not like Mauna Kea, which is the dormant volcano that makes up the other half of the Big Island. It's to get there, you have to hike up through a moonscape, and you're above the clouds at times, and you have to stay on the trail, because if you wander off the trail, you're gonna fall through you're gonna fall into let me see, one of the chambers that the lava used to flow through. That's now hollow, that sort of thing, so it's like going back to the beginning of time, to the birth of the planet, and so that had a tremendous impact on me. And I wrote a poem about it called Southern Cross, and it was my attempt to try to put this whole experience into some kind of perspective. So I'm gonna read Southern Cross for you. It's also a love poem to my ex-wife, who I'm still good friends with, and we still care for each other dearly. But we were very young when we got married, but this is Southern Cross. Watching the moon rise took me back to volcanoes, camped high enough to see our breath, where perched below us, rising just above the sphere of the Pacific, burned the Southern Cross. Amidst all the fire of volcanoes, of constellations, of a wild, endless, and heaving ocean, burned our fire, and the breath of our life rose into an endless sky. At the edge of impermanence, where we should have been afraid, where the planet still burned like the sun, where the stars pulled our hearts beyond the dark orb of the sea, we held each other and slept, and awakening together, marveled at the journey of our breath, a great and fleeting transcendence, climbing in the cold night, above the Southern Cross, above the endless heaving sea. And so that's how I had to express that moment of suddenly becoming aware of the magnificence of human life, of our existence on this planet. And here we lived, along the coast on the Big Island, and I call myself nature boy here because that's basically what I was. This was my graduate school. When I got through college, I ended up here and learned a lot about nature and about the vastness of the world. And we lived in a cane shack with no electricity. The only water was rainwater that came off the roof into a cistern. And I think probably a good half of our food, if not more, came from foraging and along the edge of the rainforest. There were a lot of old, the cane shacks were built by Japanese cane cutters, and they had been abandoned by them when cutting sugarcane became mechanized. But when they left their gardens. So there were lots of oranges, and there were bananas, and there was guava. There were prawns in the streams. If you went down to the ocean, down at Lapahoi, for instance, there were opihi, which is a snail that grows on the rocks. And I always had an old bamboo fishing rod on the top of my Rambler station wagon, which it turns out that fishing is a universal language. Wherever I've gone, if I had a fishing rod or a shirt that had something to do with fishing on it, I was able to have a conversation with the local people. But anyway, this was my education, and Hawaii has one of the best library systems in the world. So, one of the things that I did a lot of, besides collect unemployment and forage and fish and snorkel for fish, spearfish, was read. And this area gets 200 inches of rain in the wintertime. So it's, there's a good deal of time you can't do much else. You're just kind of stuck inside with a book. Later, when I came back, this is where I reestablished my bond with New England, and actually went to Wild River. And these are my brothers, my younger brothers, and we for many years did a lot of backpacking, trout fishing. Gary and I, my brother Rob is deceased now, but my brother Gary and I we still do a lot of fly fishing together, and still do some backpacking, although it's a lot harder than it used to be. And here again is this is probably where I began to get my appreciation for rivers, and I want to read a little bit from the opening poem, Wild River, just to illustrate some of what happened with Wild River. So it's at Spruce Brook. Uh, we rest on sun-warmed boulders before the lean-to and watch for brook trout. Fins and bellies as red as the setting sun, flanks the dark blue of a night sky, flecked with orbs of red and yellow stars, compact and strong, fitting in the ice melt, hiding in the cool rock shadows, darting out and back. Did you see that? So quick. Did it happen? Lying across the smooth rocks, we drink from Spruce Brook, faces in the cold current, then rise and turn, dripping to face the sun. Cold rouses us in the night to leave our sleeping bags and climb onto the lean-to roof, where we lie on our backs, awed by the burning universe of suns and planets, the flank of the great brook trout swimming across the flowing vastness of the Sky River. River smoke of the cold dawn sets the still air to glistening. Spruce rise black above the swirling vapors. So, you know, here again, you experience things like this, and they basically they make your life. They you're never quite the same again after seeing the night sky on a cold, clear night in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, where there's so many stars that there doesn't seem to be any space in between them. So this is a look at Wild River, and like Red Brook, it's not a very big stream at all. It's a lot smaller now that I'm older and I've seen a lot more rivers, but at the time when we first went up there, this place was loaded with small brook trout, wild small brook trout. Over the years, the state of New Hampshire dumped rainbows into the stream, and the rainbows started to move up the stream, and the biomass of fish now is a fraction of what it was back in the 1970s when there were wild brook trout. But if you go up the river a little bit further, there's a waterfall that blocks the rainbows, and above that, you get back into the wild brook trout again. And you get to a place called No Ketchum, which at the time when we were young, this was the lean-to that we would stay in, and occasionally a bear would come along and scratch at the back of it. And back then we were too dumb to hang our food up, and we just hung everything right there with us, you know. And if a bear came, we tried to shoo them away so that they wouldn't eat our food. And this is, so my brother and I were back there 2 years ago. This is the site of the beaver pond. It was called No Ketchum on the map. And this beaver pond, as you can see, was a huge one. The dam must have been a century old or more. And it was chock-a-block full of wild brook trout. You could spit on the pond and then come and grab your spittle. That's how hungry these guys were. So, you know, I wrote a poem about that. Called No Ketchum, basically about the experience of hiking up there with my buddy Billy, and spending 3 or 4 days just dry fly fishing for brook trout, and just immersed totally in the beauty of this wild place. So then there's the other side of things. This dam is the dam at Ludham's Ford on the Indian Head River. It's the dam that blocks the shad from going up and spawning in in what should be their spawning grounds upstream from here. So they've only got like a few hundred yards of river below this, just above tide water to spawn in. And for whatever reason, and I don't think it really is that much of a mystery. They have a very difficult time getting up this ladder. There's been a dam here on the Indian Head River for over 300 years, and this dam. I mentioned this dam in an article that I wrote that got printed in Gray's called "Shad Fishing as we Knew It." And this is the Indian Head River. As you can see, it's this is a picture from the 70s, just before the sun's going down, and the I call it the idiosyncratic timing of fishing on the Indian Head River. It's everybody used to fish at night, which now I look back at it, that's kind of a mystery because the fishing's actually better during the day. But everybody used to fish at night, so everybody would bring Coleman lanterns, and this is my buddy Bill's old Coleman lantern and rods and his cigarettes, and it's a small stream. So when you hooked up with a decent shad in this water, it was a hoot. These fish would run off line like crazy and jump all over the place, and your fly line would be all tangled up in the bushes along the bank by the, so after they got off or you managed to land them, you spend a lot of time just trying to untangle your fly line in the dark. And this is my buddy Bill. And part of that story is about the fact, Billy had polio as a kid. And that didn't stop Billy from taking up fly fishing and shad fishing with a fly, which was I don't think he ever landed a shad, but he loved hooking up with them, and he had a great time doing it. And so the story, shad fishing as we knew it, begins with the first paragraphs in italics. The dam on the Indian Head at Ludham's Ford seems as if it has always been there, a part of the river, a cement and boulder waterfall, dark, looming, and ancient. The dam is a decaying monument to an earlier time, a relic of the age when men made their fortunes at the expense of rivers and all that depends upon their unfettered flows. Believe me, dams hurt a lot of people. They made some people rich, but a lot of people became impoverished because of dams, because basically they eliminated a major part of the commons, which was the wild fisheries that people of the period those dams were built in, and including the dam on the Indian Head River. They depended upon those fish. So I go on to say, when I began fishing the river for shad with my friend Billy in 1978, the dam's presence went unquestioned. The roar of water pouring over its spillway was a part of the ambience of a night on the river. Like the hissing of our Coleman lantern in the rapidly chilling air of a clear May evening, the sound of river heaving itself over the dam upstream was a part of what we were there for. Perhaps because we were still young, we readily accepted much of the world as we found it. So, we talked about the cultural aspect of, and Tim Purrington, mentioning that. And when I was young and fishing for shad back in the 70s, I had no idea that removing a dam was even an option. And I don't think many people did at the time. So, the other thing, this is the cover picture for Wild River, and it may seem mysterious as to why I'd have a picture of, this is my old dory skiff that I used to if I needed a bluefish, I could just jump in this little thing, and this is a shore of Grape Island, which is one of the harbor islands. And the interesting thing, part of what I'm trying to write about is the significance. The wild is an important part of our lives. It's also the wild is the nutrient system for the ecological resources that we depend upon, and we have to treat that wilderness with reverence, because that's, as I said, that's the nutrient system that provides us with much of what we depend upon: clean water, clean air, and a significant amount of our food. And the wild, the wild actually can be extended all the way to our soil, the soil that we grow our food in, which is, when it's healthy, it's this amazing, fecund, almost smells like poop, uh, 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 mixture of microorganisms and decaying matter and stuff that kind of lives as its own little universe, and we've lost probably 50% of our topsoil in this country because we've used so many chemicals on it. Anyway, getting back to the boat here, this was a learning curve for me. So that's Slate Island. This is Grape Island. Used to camp on Grape Island, and so it was an amazing thing to be able to be camped on these little wild places and look across the bays at the skyscrapers of Boston with the sun shining off them as the sun set in the evening. And this is one of the campsites that, I don't know if you ever get a chance, if you like rustic camping, the Harbor Islands are just an amazing resource. And I used to, because I used to teach, I used to get a few weeks off in the summer. So I would always try to make it a point to get out to the Harbor Islands, and I would spend my my week or so when I was camped out there with my girlfriend Ann at the time, fishing for bluefish and fishing for striped bass, and it's where I began saltwater fly fishing. So we getting back to the Indian Head, which if you go through this book, you see that a lot of the material in it is about the Indian Head. One of the things that the Indian Head has taught me is that, given a chance, a river, if you back away from it, you take the dams out, back away from it, the river will do the work of restoring itself. And this is the Indian Head. This is the Waterton Dam, and this expanse of water, this pond behind the Indian Head, is Project Dale. A few weeks ago, I was actually digging petrified freshwater clam shells out of the mud bank about 6 or 7 feet above the river, that have been embedded in the mud all these years. Project Dale was the Waterton Dam was taken out in 1938 by the hurricane of 1938, and that put an end to by that time, by 1938, hydropower on these small streams was obsolete anyway. So it was just a matter of time before they would stop operating using the hydropower from this dam. However, they probably would have left the dam in place if the hurricane hadn't taken it out. But this other picture is a picture of this today. So what we have here is this beautiful looking stream with riffles and pools and mayflies and caddisflies and stoneflies. The only problem is, because of some dams upstream, it gets too warm in the summer to support trout year round. And I'd love to see some of those dams taken out. And then downstream from here is that Ludham's Ford Dam that I was talking about, the drop that basically blocks all the fish, the anadromous fish that come up the river. And back when it was built, when the first one at that location was built 300 years ago, it blocked the salmon from getting to their spawning run. And the salmon were the first anadromous fish on the river to die out. So I have a ritual every year of going to this river, and so this is my buddy Steve, and Steve Hurley dumps a bunch of trout in here, and we pretend that we're trout fishing. But once upon a time, it actually was a trout stream. And I just want to read let's see. I want to read a poem called Down Meadow. And Down Meadow is, if you go to someplace colloquial in New England, they pronounce their words funny. You know, I was someplace, I think, in Vermont, and the fellow was talking about, you know, going down Meadow. And I was thinking to myself, well, colonial people living along the North River probably spoke like that. So this poem's called Down Meadow, and it begins, at the river's edge, the black grass bends. Scything begins at the blue stem up by the row of pines, and in a line, the swaying reapers flowed down Meadow to the black grass at the river's edge, where the rock weir pokes above the riffle at low water. Here the elderly among the reapers lean upon their scythes, and with voices hushed, as if to sanctify the telling of such strange things, each elder in his turn speaks his recollection of the old times of salmon and trout that the Matakeesets had come to spear and then dry on racks of lashed saplings on the headlands above the river. How long before, in the smoke of greenwood fires, the split salmon burnished beneath the sun. Upriver, above the mill dam, the sea breeze bends the grass of the marsh, near where the salmon once spawned on gravel in the black liquid shadow of cedars. So, Down Meadow is basically an elegy for the anadromous fish of the North River. It's a system that has 63 dams in it. No, 62 dams in it. And within the last decade, North and South Rivers Watershed, working with NOAA and a few other people, have managed to take 3 dams out. And Greater Boston TU helped with, help support the removal of the tack factory dam on Third Herring Brook. And because tack factory dam was taken out, we now have brook trout using Third Herring Brook. They had been forced to live in by the dam and by the warm water of the stream, had been forced to live in a small tributary, or a couple of small tributaries that run into that stream. And the other summer we went out there, and from I want to say June right through September, there were wild brook trout picking off bugs and in the location of where the impoundment had been behind the Tack Factory Pond Dam. So it goes to show you that if you bring back the river, you rewild the river, the fish, the wild fish will come back. And so it's my hope that at some point people will drop their cultural biases and opt for returning the Indian head to what this reach of river is. This reach shows us what can happen to our rivers if we step back from them, take the dams out and let them rewild. Because, all of this that we're looking at here was impounded at one point. So I just wanted to show you the picture of the dam again, to emphasize, the damage that dams have done to rivers. And granted, dams have done a lot of good. I think, obviously for people, they've provided the power to grind grain, to saw lumber, and some of the ships, for instance, that were sacked in the Boston Tea Party, John Rowe's ships. John Rowe used to fish the Indian Head, and he'd catch 60 trout a day in April, fishing the Indian Head. But his ships were built on the Beaver, at least, were built on the North River, and the planks were sawn from the trees along the edge of the river, and those sawmills were powered by dams. But we can, and we've shown that we're able to protect, reconnect, and rewild the rivers for our wild fisheries. And so that's basically, that's my slideshow, and how it relates to the book. There's a lot more in the book about things in general, but here I'll shut it off. So, okay, screen sharing.
I think you're good, Warren. Thank you. Your talk and your sharing of your life and the history of Red Brook up through today, and your book, plus reading your book, just makes one reflect a lot about what is really important, and including all the way with a little bit of, I don't think it was that embarrassing, history with Chris Wood. It was really a compliment to the man who you are and what you've done to help preserve these special places. And job's not done yet. We got a lot of people on the call here, and hopefully we can all make an impact over our lives. That would be even a small part of what you have done. I really, really want to thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. But it's not, obviously, nothing gets, no person does anything just by themselves. We've all been in this together, and we just came through a shining example of what's possible when people get together around a cause. And I think that Chris Wood wrote, he made an interesting point when he did the comparison about scales between Red Brook and Bristol Bay. On the one hand, we're talking about protecting the land to preserve a massive, incredible natural resource. And it was so important to be able to do that. It's so wonderful that, by being persistent advocates, Trout Unlimited was able to play a role in preserving Bristol Bay, along with the people who live there and who depended on those fisheries. On the other side of the scale, there's Little Red Brook, which you can walk across in many places without even getting your knees wet, and yet what we witnessed recently was, this great outpouring. And I think what the value of Red Brook really, how it serves us today is as a symbol of what's possible, and also a reminder of what once was, and that we really, in the coming decades, I think society has to work to try to restore what once was. And I think we have to do it. The UN just came out and published a paper where they said that our societies have to change if we want to continue to survive on this planet. And I think that what we're seeing, when we see a vote like the vote that we saw in Wareham, what we're seeing is the beginning of that change. And whenever we see a dam taken out, a dam that doesn't do anything, serves no purpose, and we make that cultural transition, we're seeing the beginning of that change. And it's an important and an inspiring and a source of hope to see something like that. So
there certainly is a lot of education to do out there, but I do want to open up for a few minutes for Q&A. But there is a really good book here.
There you go.
And Warren's book, I'll put it in the chat again, is available from the Sea Run Brook rookie organization where your book is posted there, and some other goodies to help support that organization. But it was really a great opportunity to work with, I know Mike Yeoman from our board joined, and Fred was also, he's on our board and the Northeast board and with Stripers Forever, was part of that team that teamed up with you and Peter and Henry and Matt and the whole team. To get to know them was a real great opportunity to see this community come together. And, we got the vote out. It was like 7-1, 800 and something to 114 people. Just
813 to 141.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Warren, I wanted to make a comment about the valuation of ecological resources, because as an economist, it is enormously frustrating to me. I mean, I mentioned that in the context of the striped bass, but in Red Brook and in Bristol Bay, both, if you value the ecological services that are coming from these resources, from the environment, over the span of years that they endure, and you compare that and balance that against, for example, the short-term benefit of the mine that was proposed for Bristol Bay,
Yeah.
or the bullshit in
The casino. Yeah.
that there's no comparison to the two if you really look at those services. The problem is, and again, this is a cultural problem, because we take those services for granted. And basically a lot of our policy treats their value as zero because they're not in a market being bought and sold. And so when you talk about cultural change, I mean, I think we need to really, this whole notion of treating the natural world with reverence is really starts to be important. And that we ought to treat its value as infinite and sacred, and that we don't screw it up.
Yeah. I think a lot of what one of the reasons I wrote the stuff that I did that's in this book is there's two components. One is obviously Red Brook, the